Hello, my name is Paula Gloria. I'm your hostess for The Whole Tooth. On this show, we talk about the tooth, the whole tooth, and nothing but the tooth. However, for those of you who've been following this show regularly, you realize that teeth and dental health is connected to every aspect of our body. And so we've considered flower essences, we've considered Taoist practices of transmutation of stress into vitality. We've considered the relationship between hormones and good periodontal health. Tonight we have with us a very special guest. Tom Diferdinando is the executive director of HEAL, and HEAL is an organization which is dedicated to promoting more knowledge about the real cause of AIDS and what exactly AIDS is, and indeed whether people should be alarmed if they have one of the thousands of harmless passenger viruses like HIV. To HEAL's credit, thousands of people have been helped to regain health, after being given information that would be pretty disheartening. So I'm really happy to have with us tonight, Tom. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So tell me, the HIV virus, usually when people go down and get tested and they have HIV, they just feel horrible. I mean, remember when Magic Johnson had it? Everybody was in a state of depression, and yet he's still alive and kicking, I think even gaining weight.
Yeah, well, that's good for the AIDS establishment, because then they can claim credit with their medications, which is kind of a scary thing when you start looking at what these medications actually do biologically. There's even a good question whether or not Magic Johnson has really been taking them. We don't know for sure. We do know there was some period of time where he wasn't. A lot of what we'll be talking about tonight entails a lot of contradictions and paradoxes, or paradoxi, if there is a word.
Right.
One is, Magic Johnson, deadly virus, should die of this horrible, deadly disease, and then some years later we see him back on the basketball court in a very vigorous sport with all his strength and all his skills intact. Controversies, contradictions like that most people kind of put out of their consciousness, and when in fact part of what HEAL wants to do is bring those things back into people's consciousness so they can start reevaluating this whole phenomenon called AIDS.
Okay, so later on we're going to have call-ins. Our number is 247-8090. This is an incredibly vast topic. The information is, when you first hear it, it's rather shocking, but it's a pleasant shock because the information ultimately is positive about our health or the health of a loved one that may have tested positive with HIV. But before we go into our call-ins, I want to review the argument with you, and then we're going to have a public service announcement that's getting this information out. Basically, HIV is, according to Duisberg, what are Duisberg's credentials again?
Well, he's a PhD. Yeah, he's a PhD. He's a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He was one of the most respected and noticed scientists in the world. The American government loved him. He had gotten, there's a grant called the Outstanding Investigator Grant, of which there were only like 19 of them given. It's essentially you're given $1 million to do whatever you want to do. And he was refunded like 7 years in a row.
Right. Now he, as I understand, mapped the first retrovirus, and that's what HIV is, right? HIV is a retrovirus.
Yeah, well, I'll bring up a little later more detail about HIV, because there's a couple things that got to be clear about that. But in terms of Duisberg, he is recognized as the father of what's called retrovirology.
And in 1983 or 82, he said HIV has nothing to do with these 28 or so symptoms that are collected together and called AIDS. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was actually 1987. He published a paper in a scientific journal called Cancer Research. And in that, he discussed retroviruses in general as pathogens or carcinogens, because through the 70s, the cancer establishment was studying retroviruses as potential causes of cancer, because they believed it was causing a replication of cells, which is what cancer is supposed to be, a wild replication of cells. And then when they found out that that wasn't doing anything and retroviruses weren't causing a problem, voila, all the cancer heads of the cancer industry pivoted into gear into the AIDS industry and said, it didn't have anything to do with cancer, but in AIDS, it's killing cells. So it's one of those contradictions that I'm talking about that are important to know.
But the simple message, though, is that if someone tests for HIV, and I understand Duisberg was saying HIV is one of thousands of harmless passenger viruses that we carry around with us anyway. It's just for some reason this particular one got picked up. And for those unfortunate people who happen to show up with that in a test, if, God forbid, they take the deadly medicine, that's what's making them in trouble. It's not the fact that they have HIV. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's the father of retrovirology.
He's saying this. Now, a person would really have to be fortified with knowledge to kind of go against this sort of tidal wave of opinion. If you have HIV and everybody around you and all media and everything, you have a death sentence. How do you go about, helping yourself to stand up to a doctor who may himself be misinformed and giving you the best information he thinks is available?
It's a pretty complex situation, which is one of the reasons that the AIDS phenomenon has had the staying power for all these years. Duisberg completely shattered the HIV/AIDS hypothesis in 1987, and there has never been a scientific refutation to what he said. In fact, just the opposite happened. They cut off his funding and they kind of pushed his lab out in Berkeley. And
But what does the average person do? The average person who goes down and finds they have HIV, or there's a friend of theirs that had HIV, what do you do then?
If they, from the heal point of view, you're talking about?
You do nothing. You just enjoy your life and make sure don't take drugs. That's what's impairing the immune system.
In a sense, that's correct. I say in a sense because unfortunately for most people it's not as simple. The two main things that we see over the 17 years at HEAL is, one, you have both the...
Excuse me, 17 years?
17 years, since 1982 HEAL has been.
So you've been helping people?
Yeah, well, I've only been involved in them for about 5.5 years, but HEAL has been there for 17 years. We see two main things have to be addressed. One is educating yourself, but secondly, there's a very critical psychological element to all this when people are in what we call the AIDS zone.
Right.
And as long as you have...
They're in shock. They just got a test, they're HIV positive, and they think they have to cash it in.
They think they have to die, and it's carried by a whole social continuum of parents and friends and doctors and government and media and everybody reinforcing the lie that they have to die prematurely based on a totally phony hypothesis that has no scientific backing.
A phony hypothesis that's making somebody some money.
It's making a lot of people a lot of money, it's getting a lot of people a lot of political power, and it's giving a lot of people a lot of emotional satisfaction to see certain segments of society diminishing in numbers.
Now, what is... Clearly, there are people who are suffering with diseases, different symptoms. What are they? If HIV is not causing so-called AIDS, and viewers, I want to elaborate that AIDS is sort of a catch-all phrase for about 28 different symptoms, which seems to be juggled around according to the Center for Disease Control. And if I'm not mistaken, Kaposi sarcoma has been taken off the list.
I know they were, I haven't been up on the latest on that, whether or not they actually took it off. I know they were talking about taking off about 3 or 4 years ago, which was the biggest joke because that was the hallmark of AIDS back in 1981.
Right.
And then they were suddenly taking it off.
They were thinking of taking it off because it was appearing with no HIV, which means that there's no relationship to HIV and Kaposi sarcoma.
Well, which all 28 of the diseases can appear without HIV. That's part of the trick, is that you have 28 diseases, and if somebody gets a positive antibody test, and the disease with the positive antibody test, they call it AIDS. But if you have the disease without the antibody test, they call the disease by its own name.
Like pneumonia or...
That's right. Pneumonia with a positive test result is called AIDS. With a negative one is called pneumonia. But
although
clinically
everything
identical.
else, it's the same.
They're clinically identical, except that the pneumonia with the positive test carries with it the psychological toxicity and the whole social toxicity.
Right.
And the medical toxicity.
Right. So my understanding from reading a book, not this one, but one similar to it, I think it was one of his graduate students, is that when medication for AIDS was taken, that was giving results like as if you were taking chemotherapy, wasting away. And I believe the man who invented the AZT initially threw it away in the laboratory because he said this stuff is poison.
Yeah, it was very, very efficient. It was killing all the rats that it was given to.
Right.
And a lot more than just it was killing rats. This was in the 60s.
Right.
And they deemed it too toxic for terminal cancer patients.
So, in other words, with all this hoopla and alarm over a deadly virus, you wanted to just, destroy everything in order to get to it without even considering whether a virus might be the problem in the first place.
Yeah, this is called hysteria.
Hysteria, I see. So how does a person steer him or herself around this hysteria? How do you get the right information? Just plain good old solid scientific information that can make you feel good about your protocol.
Well, just looking at it from the point of view of just looking at information, whether or not it's the right information, just to know that HEAL and a number of other dissident groups around the world provide information, most of which we've gotten from two major sources. One is from the government themselves, because they are not giving you all of the information that they have. They are being very selective with it and giving the information which supports this hypothesis of HIV. But when you take the rest of the information, what emerges is a totally different picture. That's one source, and our other source of information is the many tens of thousands of people we've dealt with over the 17 years around the world who are living contradictions to the whole idea that HIV is killing them. The main contradiction we saw early on, because the people at HEAL at the beginning were kind of believing, the original claims, we saw was that the people who were coming in and getting sick and dying were the ones who were following the doctor's advice.
Right.
And the people who weren't taking the advice...
Because they're taking a medication that was too lethal for cancer patients.
Well, that came in, AZT came out in 1987, but prior to that, they were very aggressive with other chemotherapies and alpha interferon and all this other stuff. And the people with actual symptoms of AIDS in the beginning, according to the CDC's own literature, every one of them were really heavy substance users.
Now, what do you mean by substance abusers? What exactly are the substances? We're not talking about Kool-Aid.
You almost name it. No, we're not talking about Kool-Aid. It's laced with things. You go down the list of
cocaine,
heroin, ecstasy, crystal meth.
Ecstasy, like a psychedelic drug, would cause...
Well, you're bringing up a good point.
Impairment of the immune system.
When you're talking about substances that are biologically toxic, everybody's going to respond differently to different levels. Right. If you start mixing them and in different quantities and for different periods of time, relative to a given person's constitution, some people are going to get more sick than others. Some are really not going to get sick except at a really low level. Others could die the next day,
right.
With even just a couple snorts of cocaine. So,
but basically, it's not the HIV virus sitting on a dirty needle. It's what's inside the needle.
Exactly.
So that probably issuing clean needles to drug addicts probably doesn't change the incidence of so-called AIDS. Is that correct?
No, it hasn't, because it's
the drugs.
Again, yes, you look at the message. It's okay to put the poison in your body as long as you have a clean needle.
So if people come to you and they have this problem they've got these symptoms, they're wasting away and all those very sad symptoms that many people have, what do? You give them counseling, first of all, to withstand the influence to take a lethal chemical like AZT. Second, you help them clean up their life.
We'll provide them information and make referrals to, it's hard to find people who really understand this stuff, so the referrals is a very small number of people.
Right.
But the essential thing is exactly what is alternative health and healing are about, is simply about detoxifying and renourishing on the levels of body, mind, and spirit.
Now, you have a good track record at HEAL, that, in 17 years, many people who otherwise might have died have survived.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a few who the so-called opposition like to point out. They say, oh, my friends went to HEAL and they stopped their medications and they died.
They kept up an abusive lifestyle.
Yeah, you can always find there's some funny business going on where there was not an actual detoxification going on.
Now here comes a very tricky part. When you're telling people that HIV is not causing AIDS, that can oftentimes be construed in a way that you are being judgmental about someone's lifestyle. People do not want to believe that cocaine or heroin or whatever is hurting them. Plus, you're indirectly implying if somebody has these symptoms that they're not taking care of themselves very well, and people don't want to hear that. They would rather blame a virus and have the whole medical establishment, even if it's making a lot of money, be supporting their addiction. Have you run into any of this?
Well, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Actually, but the question that is begged by what you're saying is it comes back to the gay men who were being affected by this situation. It's interesting because we see, as one of the people we work with pointed out one day, if you pointed to a group of heterosexuals and said, you know, they have substance abuse in their lives and it's hurting them, nobody would bat an eye. But if you point to a small subset of the gay community and saying that these men were substance abusers and it was killing them, all of a sudden you're deemed a homophobe, and that makes it easy to dismiss everything else you said up until that point.
Well, now, when I started reading the literature, I was very encouraged that because members in the gay community wanted to come out and really clear up the air about what was happening so that people weren't saying you weren't against gays.
There weren't
They just
many
wanted
of them.
There weren't.
No. The majority of what we see at HEAL, the gay men coming through there and the ones, you know, in the environment, many are in line with the AIDS establishment. They're not vociferously so. I mean, a lot of the AIDS activists, the ones who deem themselves AIDS activists, are quite vociferous, and they say HEAL is dangerous and hurting people, and of course, they're dangerous and hurting people. We're dangerous to the pharmaceutical company and the whole AIDS establishment.
And we have a couple of calls, so let's see if we have some vociferous calls here. Thank you for calling the Whole Tooth.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you have a question for Tom Diferdinando?
Yes. About 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with PML. I'm not sure, PML.
PML. Do you know what that is?
Do you know what that stands for?
It's lesions on the brain.
Uh-huh.
Brain lesions.
Do you think that has anything to do with HIV? Were you tested for HIV?
I am HIV positive.
And you're being told that you have AIDS? Is that what you're feeling?
No. PML is a progressive disease, a fatal illness that people usually pass away within 4 months. I was diagnosed with PML in '97, and this past December I had a brain biopsy done, and it proved that I did not have PML. I just wanted to know if he had any ideas or have heard of any brain lesions associated with AIDS that is not PML.
Caller, could I ask you a question? You're calling in. You're not. Nobody knows who you are.
Yes.
Could I ask you? Have you taken heavy recreational drugs?
No.
No.
I'm drug-free for nine years now.
For 9 years, you're drug-free. Okay, Tom. What would HEAL do with this man? How would they counsel him or advise him?
Well, first of all, he's saying he doesn't even have an AIDS diagnosis. He's dealing with a question of an HIV positivity, I assume, from what he's saying.
You understand, caller, Tom is saying the HIV means nothing. Okay, that part's encouraging, but now your brain lesions, that's we have to put some attention on.
Yeah, brain lesions is a whole other thing, and I would encourage you to start, I don't know what state you're in, or I just know what I'm hearing audibly.
The lesions are on the cerebellum, and they affect my motor functions and speech and vision.
I'll tell you what, caller, can you call us after the show and we'll put a little more in-depth attention, because it's a little bit specialized what you're talking about.
Thank you.
And we
Okay,
can't really do
thank you for calling.
advice.
Yeah, we're not doctors here either. Thank you for calling. Thank you for calling the Whole Tooth. I think I lost that caller. Okay. Well, anyway, that brings up a good point. Is it kind of dangerous what HEAL is doing? Because you may be accused of giving medical advice to people in a very regulated society where you're supposed to have, licenses and so on.
We can't do anything about the accusations, but we know that we're not giving medical advice.
You're not.
We're providing information for people to make informed choices, and we can make referrals, and that's about all you can do. We can give our direct experience. I can give my direct experience with alternative health and medicine of, the role of detoxification and re-nourishment plays in life. And, if you're dealing with brain lesions or anything, obviously, the whole point is that the body, the mind, the spirit, everything moves toward health and healing. If it's not moving in that direction, there is some obstacle on some level, mind, body, or spirit. And the job is to ferret that out. And if you're in an acute situation, I also should be clear, there is like a small window where we would support somebody in wanting to use modern medicine. We support people doing what they want to do anyway.
Sure.
They're making informed choices. and we're not saying throw out all medicine.
Basically, you're just a good American and believe in free speech and say, let's have a diversity of opinion
That's
here
right.
and let people
I want the
use their...
truth too.
Right, okay. Let's see what another caller's here.
For the tooth.
Thank you for calling. Do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I was just calling because I am a holistic health practitioner in New York City, working in the bioenergy field, and I thought that your viewers would be interested in knowing about the recent technology that's being made available to the public.
So basically, if someone had HIV, you would, with your types of therapy, help these people? I mean, what Tom's saying, they don't need any help. Just, you have HIV, so what? Just make sure you take your vitamins and go to bed at a reasonable time. And
Right. With a bioenergy testing, we can determine through the acupuncture points if there are imbalances in the body, and obviously there are imbalances when there's pathology.
I believe that acupuncture is very good for helping people.
I can hear you on the telephone.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me on the television?
Yeah, I can hear you on the phone.
Okay.
Phone now.
Okay, acupuncture is supposed to be very helpful for people with addictions, particularly drugs. Do you work with this?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's very good.
Yeah.
Thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
What about the different types of therapies that come up when people say, you know, this therapy will help you get rid of AIDS? And basically what you're saying, HIV is not causing AIDS, but a highly stressful environment or putting toxic chemicals in the body is what's causing it.
Yeah, exactly the same thing that makes anybody sick. You know, if you have a high enough load of toxicity, no matter what the realm of the toxicity, whether you're talking about emotionally or physically or nutritionally, or just even extraordinary lack of rest, relationship stress, all these things knock down your energy. Relationship stress knock your energy down.
Come on, light off now.
Well, this is in a way it actually has some truth. The thing is, though, if you don't address these factors, this is what makes HIV so attractive. Because the real stressors in life, one of the things we point out here is that you don't need HIV to explain AIDS, you need it to keep from explaining AIDS. It's like the ultimate
people can
scapegoat.
have responsibility for other parts of their life, for their ill health.
Be careful, you're being a homophobe by saying that.
You're being a homophobe by saying that.
Well, I'm saying these are the common accusations. Again, it's back to that argument.
Injection drug users have very high incidence of so-called AIDS, right?
Yep.
So you would be against drug users. I mean, what we want to just do, and I assume what you want to do, is just make people happy and healthy.
Well, we want to provide information, and one thing I should mention here is about these tests themselves. Because Duisberg didn't go into that, but these antibody tests themselves, particularly the ELISA and the Western blot, are scientifically invalid tests, and this has been published. And there's actually not evidence that you're actually testing for a given virus. So the question is, what is this test actually testing for? And that's to make it short. It's actually a stress test, let's put it that way.
Are we going to share the public service announcement? Okay. Let me take a call first. Great. Thank you for calling The Whole Tooth. Do you have a question for Tom?
Yeah, I was listening. It's a very interesting show, as was your last one that I saw. Does heal?
Oh, the last one with the Reichian therapist. We're talking about Reiki.
No, there was one. I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks ago regarding root canal.
Oh, right. We're gonna talk a lot more next week about that. I want to say you're still talking about the dentist.
Yeah, good. No, but I have a question.
Okay, great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, I lost the sound here. Does heal? I'm a little unclear as to exactly what the alternative of what heal is trying to suggest here. Does heal believe that the HIV virus suppressed the immune system to any serious degree at all, if at all?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit of a trick question because you have to determine, how are you determining somebody has HIV? You're doing it by using a fraudulent test. But
well, you didn't say that through the show at all.
It's a little bit of a complicated topic to go into great detail, and all that information is available at HEAL. But I understand what you're asking is, if people show up with HIV, does it mean that they have a stressed nervous system? Because I think there was one doctor, unlike Duisberg, saying that more stressed people are more likely to show up with HIV than less stressed people?
Well, the real stress that HIV, there is, all these things are the seed of truth. The seed of truth that HIV is causing damage is the belief in it. That's very true. To give somebody an HIV diagnosis, if they are susceptible to believing in that, if they haven't had the information, if the information has been held back from them,
Right.
Or they have other things going in their lives that makes that belief system attractive.
Excuse me. So you're saying physiologically HIV does not suppress the immune system?
No,
That's your position.
There's absolutely no evidence of that.
But does that make sense to you, caller, that if you got the news that you had HIV and the belief system was that it would kill you, that you'd be not feeling too good?
Oh, I have no question that there's a certain degree of psychosomatic reaction to it, but
Right.
it doesn't mean that it eliminates the fact or the possibility that HIV does cause an honest-to-goodness immune suppression.
If you want to look at actual scientific evidence, there is not scientific evidence which actually supports that when you really take it all together. I'd also mention...
I'm sorry,
okay.
we're going to have to close.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
an incredible...
Can I just say one thing? I think your sound is a little bit low, not only on the telephone, but also through the TV, just so you know.
Right.
I think...
We're going to have to wrap up now anyway.
Yeah,
Appreciate
okay.
it, Caller.
And
We'll talk more.
thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us at
Right.
The Whole Tooth, and join us again. I'd like to have Tom on the show more often because I think it's a very important topic, and I appreciate all of you calling in and giving us your feedback so we can help to develop better health. And better physical health is better dental health. So keep smiling. Thank you for joining us at The Whole Tooth.
Aids, where the doctor takes your money, the government takes your rights,
The medicine takes your life. The virus takes the blame. And science takes the credit.
Are you tired of being taken for a ride?